45 days until we assume the mayor's office, and I've been getting so many questions about the violence that's going on in the community, so I thought I'd give you guys an update on just the transition in general, and then we can take questions as it relates to violence. I want to say, obviously, that we have had a tough time in Rochester with violence. You know, I keep this jar here, and this represents 3 years' worth of shooting victims. So there's 816 shooting victims in 2019, 20, and 21, which equated to about 148 homicides. And obviously this year, 380. I've added 380 pebbles to this jar this year. And of that 380, as you know, 75 have been deaths. So the question that we have to ask in this community is how many more of these we're going to add. Obviously, I'm not the mayor yet. It takes 45 days. I will be. But we are hard at work on trying to stem the challenges as it relates to violence. Today, I wanted to let you know that today I convened with relevant law enforcement officials from every level of government to provide guidance and preparation for my administration. The attendees, some of the attendees included U.S. Attorney Trini Ross, U.S. Marshal Charles Salina, New York State Police, Monroe County Sheriff, District Attorney Sandra Dorley, County Executive Adam Bello, and members of his team, Interim Rochester Police Chief Dave Smith, Director of Emergency Communications Mike Soretto, as well as some other advisors on public safety, Cedric Alexander and Victor Saunders, and other members of my transition team. I am serious about bridge building in our community, and bridge building cannot just be hyperbole. It must be put into practice. Eradicating violence from our community will take a whole-of-community approach with clear communication and effectual coordination. And as mayor, I've said that's what I would try to do, and that's why we brought all the levels of law enforcement together. Next week, I will convene a group of grassroots activists to also talk about how the Evans administration can work to eradicate this violence that we've seen in the streets. And in keeping with that collaborative spirit, one of the things I'm asking as a prelude to Thanksgiving, I'm asking for everyone in Rochester on November 24th, the day before Thanksgiving at noon, to pause for 2 minutes to reflect on the violence that has afflicted our community in the past 11 months. As you know, a lot of the clergy have been having prayer stops, prayer circles to pray for violence. But as we head into this Thanksgiving, I want everyone to think about the 75 homicides, a record that Rochester has never seen, in the over 380 shootings that we've had, to pause for peace, for 2 minutes, pray, reflect, and think about what we can do going forward to try to eradicate this collaboratively. It is going to take a community approach, and that's why I had all of the relevant partners in government together to chart that path forward, and we discussed a lot of things that we will be able to do together in order to do that. Again, getting guns off the streets, working on long-term solutions that are just not about law enforcement, but involve connecting with the community and in our neighborhoods. I wanted to let you know also, as an update, I'll be making several senior appointments soon, and those appointments will probably start after Thanksgiving, going into the first part of the year. As it relates to the police, the interim police chief will continue to serve me until we find a permanent chief, and we will be doing a national search for a permanent chief, and we will be naming a search firm soon that will be able to help us with that search. And the other concern that we have and we'll be looking at and monitoring as we go into January are the vaccination rates in the city of Rochester. As you know, COVID continues to rage. Hopefully, we are starting to see that people who are eligible for boosters will be able to get them. We want to encourage Rochester residents coming up to Thanksgiving to please make sure that if you are eligible to be vaccinated, please get vaccinated. We are, after Thanksgiving's coming up, and it is very, very concerning to many of us in the community what will happen after Thanksgiving. And we also know that flu season is upon us. So we're asking people to be smart. As I've always said, we're not going to lecture people. But we are going to try to get credible messengers and people to connect with folks to urge them to be able to be vaccinated. You know, in 45 days, I don't want to see COVID number deaths spike in the city of Rochester. I want to be able to start January 1st off with a good celebration and a decline in the number of COVID cases that we have in the city of Rochester. So we want to be able to encourage people to do that. I also want to say that we know that the opioid epidemic is still a major problem in our community. And as we go through this holiday season, it is important for us to check on and think about our loved ones that might become victims to opioids. That number of deaths is almost just as high as the number of homicides that we had. So when you add coronavirus, opioid deaths, and the large number of violence that we've had this year, you feel as though you feel a great level of despair. But I can tell you after the meeting today and talking with other community leaders that I am actually very still optimistic about the future. And I'm asking all of the community to really come together and join me in working to eradicate this problem. I'm modeling that behavior that I'm expecting the community to model. That's why we had all the levels of government here just before you got here. And I'm sure some of you saw them walking out as you were coming in. They are committed to making sure that that I can be successful as your mayor. And I want folks to know that even though I'm not sworn in yet, we are hard at work on trying to tackle these issues so we will be able to turn a switch on day one. So with that, I'll briefly take any of your questions. These briefings, I'll be doing these periodically, maybe every other week as we head up to the inauguration, with the hope that next time I do one, we'll have some people here, and I'll be announcing a couple of senior appointments, but they will come in waves. Mr. Garzone?
Yes, sir. What does a long-term solution to the violence look like?
Great question. It's a two-pronged approach. The number one thing is stopping the bleeding, right? So how do we make sure that we work with all of our levels of government to choke off and identify individuals who are creating most of the havoc in our city? And I can tell you that there's only a small percentage of people that are doing that. But we have to make sure that we go after and target those people and get them off the streets. And if it's not that, give them the resources that they need in order to not decide to do something that they can't take back. So that's one end. But on the other end, as you know, I talk about the long-term solutions, which are we need to make sure that we have increased job training program, that we are providing people all the socio-emotional, economic support in order to make them not to go down that path. But we have to be able to do both at the same time. Because as a woman said to me the other day, she said, yeah, that's nice, you're talking about the long term, but what about right now? And right now, someone just shot outside my house, and I got a bullet lodged in my steps. So that's good you're talking about that, but I want this solved right now. So we have to be able to do both. And that is what it looks like. As you know, I will be announcing very soon. We talked about the gun czar, but I got beat up. They said, oh, we don't like the czar. We don't like the czar title. So we're going to change the name. It will be a special advisor to me, and it will be strictly on violence reduction. That will be in the mayor's office, that will report directly to me. They will be an expert on law enforcement. They will be an expert on the streets. They will have the credibility to be able to go out into the community and talk to people there, and then the credibility to sit in the room with the U.S. attorney and the district attorney and the police chief and all levels of law enforcement to be able to also be credible. And that is going to be absolutely important to coordinate a lot of these programs that we are going to want to be able to do long term. And we're going to do the long term stuff. But we're also going to focus on the individuals that are wreaking havoc in this community and make sure that we tell them, you got a choice. Your choice is that you reform your ways, or you're going to get a timeout. What's it going to be? Period. People have had enough. I've had enough. And, you know, I don't want to put 75 more beads in here. I don't want to put 75 more beads in here starting next year in 2022. We want to have less. We want to have less. Too many people have lost their lives. And it's affected so many people. Imagine all of the connections that these folks have and how it's affected them long term.
Mr. Alexander, on your transition team, does that make him perhaps a lead candidate for that role that you just described?
Cedric will tell you that he's there as an advisor and to help. But we'll be looking high and wide for, as you know, we're doing a national search, but he is a good friend, and he's doing me a favor as a friend to serve in the capacity in terms of the advice that he's given as it relates to law enforcement.
There are the long-term schools.
Schools, yes.
You, in the past, have advocated mayoral control.
No, I've never advocated mayoral control.
Do you now?
Do I now?
Or what do you see happening, as we see it now, vote of no confidence from the teachers' union for the...
Yeah, well, I can tell you right now, I have my hands full as it relates to violence and other issues that are right now in this community. What I want to be able to do with the school district is to be able to be a support, whatever I can do. Now, I will use the bully pulpit and call them out when they're not doing the right thing, but I will also applaud them when they're doing the right thing. But right now, for city government, we just don't have the capacity to take on the school district. Am I interested in the school district? Absolutely. Well, I have a community education task force, community education cabinet that will work to come up with 3 to 4 things that we can do to help address the school district. Absolutely, because we need a strong school district in order to have a strong city. But in terms of me advocating for mayoral control at this point, that's just not on the table. We got so much to deal with as it relates to Rochester. You know, members of my transition team are here. They can tell you. Our list is already so long. Schools is on there, but that's something that I don't control. I don't have that within my purview. But I do hope to be able to influence and be a support to try to help them in the situation that they're in.
Malik, what's the status of the legislation that was going to be presented to City Council to enact the search firm for the police chief search? And then after looking at that, what are some of the things you'd like to find in a police chief that you feel would be conducive to you know, healing some of the divides or working on some of the cultural things you see in Rochester related to police?
Great question. So we're narrowing it down to what search firm we're going to use. Obviously, I'm a banker, so I'm a little cheap. So I want to make sure that I get the best dollar for whatever firm we use. So once we come to terms on that, then we will submit that to City Council. I'll submit that to City Council. And in terms of what we're looking for in qualities in a chief, I mean, it is someone that has the respect of the men and women in uniform, but they also have to be able to have the respect of the larger community, be able to inspire folks in the community with confidence that they can come with trust and transparency, but then also have a mindset for community policing. That has a mindset to see how you can bridge the divides, and we'll also buy into the Evans agenda of building a bridge to Rochester's future. And a bridge to Rochester's future involves 21st century policing, where we are able to be agile, but also able to be tactical in terms of what it is that we decide to do in order to really involve the community in a way in which they feel as though they can be a part of the solution. So that's a tall order for a person, and it may take some time to find someone that is able to do that, but that is what I would be looking for in a chief. Any other?
Thanks, Malik.
Yeah, no, thank you. Any other questions? I saw someone getting ready to say something. Yes, and you are from?
I'm Minority Reporter.
Okay. Yep. Oh, you're.
Yeah, sorry.
Patty's not here. Oh man.
Yeah.
Now I was wondering why it was so quiet. Where's Patty?
She's retiring in December.
Oh wow! Congratulations. And then Jane Flash is also retiring. We got a lot of retirees going on. A lot of retirement going on in the media.
I just had a quick question.
Yep.
There was an RPD presser last week, and they mentioned an increased resources for RPD. Do you expect the number of homicides to increase or decrease in 2022?
Well, my hope is that they will decrease, but hope is not a plan. So we have to make sure, and that's why we had this meeting earlier today with all the relevant levels of players as it relates to law enforcement. So it's going to take that, and that's why we're having a meeting next week with some small group of community leaders. So we got to be able to get community leaders, law enforcement, and everyone together to make sure that we have a plan. And that's why I'm doing this now 45 days out, so that way we can be able to address the situation. But my hope is that we will see a decrease in homicides next year. But it won't happen unless the community participates. We cannot do this alone. And I want everyone to understand, it's just not law enforcement, it's just not Malik Evans, it is the community that we have to be able to inspire. How do we make sure that people feel safe and want to come forward when they see something? If they don't feel safe, they're not going to cooperate, and then we won't be able to get the bad guys off the street or someone who might be carrying an illegal gun. So how do we work to be able to create this environment where people are connected? That's why the position of the special advisor on violence reduction is absolutely critical. They're going to be critical in terms of coordinating that. So we want to make sure that we do that in a major way. Jim and then Gino.
Will you, considering this terrible year, will you in your first year look into any impact that bail reform has had on your community? Those who support law enforcement believe it's part of the reason, despite there's no proof at this point, but it's not been studied. Will you be open to that idea?
We are going to look at it because I'm a data-driven guy, so we need to look at what the data says. And remember, we're not the only city in New York State, so we want to be able to see how did it affect Buffalo, how did it affect Rochester, how did it affect Syracuse. There are cities right now whose homicide rate are less than they were. One of your stations did a good article on your website. I can't remember which one of you guys it was. It was good. So I won't say who it was because then you take credit for it. But it was good. It was a good article. It talked about how some cities have seen decreases in their homicides, and we have bail reform in New York State. So I think we have to follow the data. But if it is a conversation, it is a conversation that we should have. But any conversation we have, it has to be backed up with data and information, and not broad speaking. I don't do that. You guys know I don't do that. I got to have the facts and the information before I theorize on stuff. You guys you guys, and that's what you guys are. That's what you guys do as reporters. You go get the information before you theorize on it. So I want to make sure that we do that before we say that's the reason.
And considering the conversation you just led in the other room, what do you know about why this has happened in recent weeks and months?
Lots of it is lack of cooperation, absolutely. And there are cases of individuals who are violent that are able to continue to walk the streets. So that we do know that is a challenge. But one of the biggest things is the cooperation piece. If you see something and then they can come and say, Malik, if you say something, I'm going to get you. You're going to think twice before you want to cooperate. And again, remember, and I want to reiterate this to Rochesterians, to the greater Rochester region, there's only a small amount of people that are being disruptive and trying to tear this community apart. This isn't 50% of the population. This is a small part of the population, and that's why I advocate a scalpel approach and not an axe. We need to zero in on those folks, and that was exactly the conversation we had in the room. We know who these folks are, but we have to make sure that we either give them support, or if not, can't do that, then they need to suffer the consequences. But that is our challenge, and that will be important for us to remember leading up to January 1st. I'm sorry, yes, and then we'll go to you.
So yeah, aside from police chief, what are the top priority for appointments right now in your mind? And are there any department heads or senior leadership from the previous administration you'd like to retain moving forward?
We will always retain some. We'll retain some. We'll have some new. You never throw the baby out with the bathwater, so there will always be people who you retain from administration to administration. There's some great people that work in City Hall, and there are a lot of people who, what you call APT, which are appointments. And there's hundreds of them. So obviously you're not going to get rid of all of them. There will be absolutely people that will be retained, but there will also be a lot of new faces. There'll be a lot of new faces that we will be seeing at City Hall. So you'll see a mix. It'll be old and new, but positions in terms of importance, they're all important. I mean, the senior management team positions are extremely important, and what you try to do is fill them as you can. Some you will fill, immediately, and then some might take a little bit of time, but we will definitely be announcing lots of appointments within the next 2 weeks. Yes?
Mayor Johnson, when he came into office, was actually coming off a record year.
1993, absolutely.
And you're going on the same thing. Have you guys talked? And I know he's a mentor.
Yes, yeah, we've absolutely talked. And one of the things he said to me was, you got to get a good chief. I mean, he made that clear. You got to get a good chief, and he talked to me about chemistry, which was right. I've also talked to others, Bob Duffy, and everyone says the same thing. When you pick a team, the chemistry's got to be right, and you got to make sure that they have the citizen priority number one. So yeah, but this time is almost actually a carbon copy of 1993. If you remember, on election night, November 2nd, 2021, I was getting ready to take the stage at where were we at? The Hyatt downtown. And if you notice, I was excited about winning, but I was also very deflated because a 15-year-old kid had just got murdered. And if you remember election night, 1994, Raleigh Kenton was murdered coming home from school, not from school, from Bible study. And he was clutching his Bible as he was coming home from Bible study. So, I mean, we've seen this violence in our community before. And, 93 and 94 were wild, and now 21 and 22 are challenges. So that's not lost on me. I've had, someone murdered outside my home when I was a teenager. And I still think about that, and that was almost 30 years ago, 28 years ago. So it's a challenge. It does something to our community. It makes us feel as though we're defeated and that we're on our back. And the message that I want to send to people is that we can get up. We can get up off the pavement, and we don't have to stand for this. But I can't do it by myself. The police can't do it by themselves. The community groups can't do it by themselves. We need to do this in a collective way in order to stop the carnage that is on our streets. And if we don't take a whole of community approach with everybody working together, we're going to keep seeing what we're seeing. And that's when, and you know, people keep saying, what are you doing, what are you doing, what are you doing? I said, I'm not the mayor yet, but I just want to let folks know that we're working on it, and we hope that we will have a good plan. I know that we will have a good plan come January 1st. Any last minute questions before we wrap up?
Is Malik Henwing's brother?
Yes. Yes. So I want to thank you guys for coming, and again, just be used to this. We'll try to do this. As part of our trust and transparency, we want to make sure that we're communicating with the public regularly. Some people want me to talk every single day. They say, we haven't seen anything on social media. What is he doing? But we're working. We're working 14-hour days to try to get up and get the administration started. So I thank you all for coming so much, and obviously reach out to the team if you have any questions or anything going forward. So thank you, everyone.